Snow fell in thick, heavy curtains, blotting out the horizon. Lila wrapped her green wool shawl tighter around her shoulders and leaned into the wind, her breath coming out in quick puffs of white. The storm had come earlier than anyone in the valley expected, swallowing the trail home. She had only meant to walk as far as the ridge to gather firewood before the sky darkened. But now the storm was her enemy, and the mountain seemed endless. Her boots crunched through the powder until her legs ached. Panic fluttered in her chest. She wasn't sure how far she'd wandered from the cabin. Then she saw him, a dark shape against the swirling white. A man on horseback, dismounting with a hurried grace. His hat brim was frosted with snow, his coat dusted white. "You lost?" He called over the wind, voice rough but not unkind. Lila nodded, embarrassed. "My cabin's that way, I think." He offered a gloved hand. "Come on. It's not safe out here alone." She hesitated for only a heartbeat before letting him lead her toward a small stand of trees where his horse was tied. Together they made their way down the ridge until the glow of her cabin finally appeared through the blizzard. Warm, golden light against the storm. Inside, by the crackling fire, he introduced himself as Caleb, a neighbor from the next valley over. He had been riding out to check his traps when the storm hit. "You shouldn't be alone up here," he said, his tone not scolding but worried. "This winter's going to be a hard one." Lila glanced at the fire. "I don't have much choice," she murmured. He didn't press her, but his eyes softened as though he understood. The storm raged for 2 days, trapping Caleb at Lila's cabin. At first their conversations were clipped, two strangers sharing the same space, waiting for the weather to break. Lila busied herself with chores, chopping vegetables for stew, patching a quilt near the fire. Caleb helped where he could, keeping the woodpile stocked and shoveling snow from the doorway. One night, as the wind howled outside, they sat across from each other at the small table. Lila noticed the quiet strength in his hands as he mended a broken bridle strap. "You're good at fixing things," she said softly. He gave a small shrug. "Out here you have to be. There's no one else to do it for you." She stared at the flames, hesitating before speaking again. "I came here because there was nothing left for me back home. My folks passed last spring. I couldn't stay in that empty house." Caleb looked up, his dark eyes gentle. "I know that feeling." Something in the way he said it made her heart ache. They didn't speak for a while, but the silence felt easier, warmer somehow. The third night they heard them, distant howls echoing through the snowy trees. Caleb was already on his feet, rifle in hand. "Wolves are hungry this time of year," he said, checking the window. Lila's heart pounded. She had heard them before, but never so close. They waited in tense silence until the sound of scratching at the barn door made them both rush outside. The cold bit at Lila's cheeks, but she followed Caleb into the night. Several pairs of glowing eyes stared back from the tree line. Caleb fired a warning shot into the air, and the wolves retreated, melting into the shadows. When they returned to the cabin, breathless, Lila found herself shaking, more from adrenaline than cold. Caleb knelt beside her. "You did good," he said softly, steadying her hands. "You stayed calm." She let out a small laugh that was almost a sob. "I wasn't calm at all," Caleb smiled faintly. "You were braver than you think." By the time the storm passed and the first signs of spring touched the mountain, Caleb and Lila had fallen into an easy rhythm. He helped her mend fences, repair the barn roof, and gather supplies from the valley. One quiet evening they sat together on the porch, the air soft with the scent of melting snow. "You could come down to the valley," Caleb said at last. "You don't have to be up here alone." Lila looked out at the mountains. She had come here to run from her grief, but now, sitting beside him, she didn't feel so alone anymore. "Maybe I don't want to be," she said softly. Caleb reached over, taking her hand gently. "Then don't." For a moment the whole world seemed to hold its breath. The mountains, the trees, even the last of the winter snow. By summer the cabin felt like a home, not just a shelter. Lila had planted a small garden, and Caleb's visits had become regular, then permanent. One morning, as sunlight streamed across the floor, Caleb set a carved wooden ring on the table. "I made this for you," he said simply, "because this place isn't just yours anymore. It's ours." Tears filled Lila's eyes as she nodded. "I think I finally found something worth living for." Caleb smiled, pulling her close. "Me too." Outside, the mountain stood tall and green, the memory of winter fading into a promise of everything still to come. The days grew longer and the air was rich with pine and blooming wildflowers. Caleb had moved his few belongings into the cabin, a saddle, a rifle, a well-worn leather journal, and the place felt different now. Lila noticed how often she smiled without thinking. She woke to the sound of Caleb splitting wood, or humming softly as he saddled his horse. When she brought in baskets of early berries, he would tease her gently until she laughed. One afternoon they worked side by side, mending the garden fence that the winter storms had nearly destroyed. Lila wiped sweat from her brow and looked at Caleb. "You don't have to do all this," she said. Caleb leaned on the fence post, a grin tugging at his lips. "You kidding? I've been waiting a long time to have someone worth building a fence with." Her heart swelled. She realized he wasn't just talking about the garden. When the first leaves turned gold, trouble came from the valley. A small group of strangers rode up to the cabin one afternoon. They were fur traders, rough-looking men who claimed Caleb's traps had been set too close to their lines. Lila stood on the porch, her heart thudding while Caleb faced them calmly. "I didn't cross your lines," Caleb said evenly, "but I'll check them again." "No need for trouble," one of the men sneered, eyeing Lila. "You're mighty soft-spoken for someone living this far out. Hope you can defend this place when winter comes." Caleb's jaw tightened. His hand hovered near the rifle on the porch rail. The standoff stretched until the men finally rode off, promising to be back. That night, Lila found Caleb sitting by the fire, staring at the flames. "You're worried," she said. He nodded. "I can take care of myself, but I have to make sure I can take care of you too." Lila moved closer, resting her hand on his. "You already do." When the snow came again, it was easier this time because they faced it together. They spent long evenings by the fire, Caleb teaching Lila to whittle, Lila showing him how to sew stronger patches on his worn shirts. Their conversations were warmer, filled with quiet laughter. One night, as the wind howled outside, Caleb surprised her by pulling out a small carved box. Inside was a silver locket, a family heirloom he had kept hidden for years. "I was saving this," he said softly, "for someone who made me feel like I belonged somewhere." Lila touched the locket, tears stinging her eyes. "And now you do?" Caleb nodded, smiling faintly. "Yeah, now I do." She put the locket around her neck and kissed him, the firelight glowing between them. By the next spring, the cabin was no longer just theirs, a boy from the valley, an orphan whose parents had passed in the harsh winter, came to stay with them while the local pastor searched for someone to care for him. Lila knelt to the boy's level, smiling gently. "You can stay here as long as you need." Caleb ruffled the boy's hair. "We could use an extra hand on the ranch anyway." The boy's shy smile warmed something deep inside Lila. Weeks turned into months, and the boy became part of their days, feeding the chickens, laughing when Caleb taught him to ride, listening to Lila read by lantern light. One evening, Lila looked at Caleb as the boy fell asleep by the fire. "Feels like a family, doesn't it?" Caleb nodded, pulling her close. "It is a family." Years later, the cabin had grown. An extra room, a bigger barn, a wider garden. The boy had become a young man, strong and sure, calling Caleb and Lila Pa and Ma. On a golden summer evening, the three of them sat on the porch together, watching the sun sink behind the peaks. "This was the coldest place I'd ever been," Lila said quietly. "And now it's the warmest." Caleb smiled, brushing her hair back. "Because we made it that way." The mountains stood tall around them, no longer just a place of survival, but of love, courage, and a future worth living for.
Like, share, and subscribe.